Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Pilar de la Cruz Samoulian. We're going to be discussing her amazing memoir, But I Want to Be a Nurse, available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And people, listen, Pilar was brought to our network by some of the best publishers in the business, Author Reputation Press. So if you or anybody you know have a book that they'd like moved, well, give yourself the best gift you can give. Contact ARP and have their fantastic team move it for you. And you can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. And listen, people, the moment you head to her Amazon or her Barnes & Noble page, you start to do any research on Pilar's book, But I Want to Be a Nurse, you know what we're going to be discussing. I mean, right there in the title, it's going to give you an idea, right? You're not too far off just by that. Now, it's an inspirational memoir, okay? Now, as I've mentioned a number of occasions in the past, I personally love when I have guests that have written memoirs, because people, we know that a lot of the obstacles and a lot of the adversity that we tend to face in life, when, as much as we don't want to, when we do continue to work through them and get past it, those experiences equate to wisdom. Well, what I love about having memoirs on the network is, listen, people, it doesn't always have to be your own experiences that wisdom derives from. I love having authors that have written memoirs on the network because it's a learning lesson for me, right? It's things that will be reinforced or things learned for the first time. But I love it because then I potentially don't have to make some of the mistakes in order to learn from the notions, right? And I really am looking forward to that aspect of it. But also, when we're talking about the medical field and when we're talking about being a nurse, it is something that hits particularly close to home for me, right? There's a fondness in my heart for it. You all know I've mentioned this as well. My significant other is in the medical field. She's a nurse practitioner and has been for a number of years. So this is going to be an interview I know she is absolutely looking forward to. And listen, Pilar is the expert. She's written the book. She's pulling from her experience, and she's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. But one underlying message that you're really going to be able to attach yourself to is it's all about never giving up on your dreams. And I absolutely love it. I mean, we can all get behind that, and we know that that's not always easy to do, given the pressures of life, or pressures of maybe family members or those around you. Following your dreams to fruition may not always be the easiest thing. So I love the fact that we have Pilar here on the line to discuss things from her perspective, because she was also faced with a lot of those similar things and crossroads, and how she overcame it is going to be a wonderful, inspirational story for all involved. Pilar, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's a pleasure to have you as a guest, and we're really looking forward to this because I know we have a lot of information to cover. Now, Pilar, this is, of course, an inspirational memoir, so I know we're going to cover some of your background anyway, so without further ado, let's just jump right in. Let's learn about the book, But I Want to Be a Nurse. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, the book basically came about because I knew I wanted to be a nurse from the age of 7 years old. I would see nurses in their white uniforms when I had my tonsils taken out. I was in the hospital, and I'd get this butterfly feeling in my stomach. And I thought, that's what I want to be when I grow up. So at a very young age, I knew that I wanted to be a nurse. And through grammar school, I started high school, and that was my goal. But unfortunately, when I got to be a sophomore and I was called into my counselor's office and asked, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a nurse. But immediately responded. And my counselor shook his head, looked at me and said, no, you're poor, you're Mexican, you're going to be a secretary. And I said, secretary? I don't want to be a secretary. Nothing against secretaries, but that's not what I feel I'm called to do. And he said, we know best. And so my junior year in high school, I was placed in all these secretarial courses, typing, shorthand, and I aced them. It was the only year I made CSF, I believe. My senior year, they sent me to do work study where I had to go be a secretary for a Catholic school for 2 periods, to walk to the school and walk back after the 2 periods and come back for the rest of my classes. So I definitely knew then that I did not want to be a secretary. And when I graduated, the one scholarship that I did get, that I did receive, was for my full tuition to Four Seas Business School in Fresno, where I basically lived in the San Joaquin Valley. And I gave it back. And my father said to me, why would you do that? We don't have any money to send you to college. Why would you give away the scholarship that you received? Mm-hmm. And I said, but Dad, I don't want to be a secretary. I want to be a nurse. And he said, how are you going to do that? And I said, I have no idea. So that was the emphasis behind this book, because I know that unfortunately some of that is still going on today. And I wanted to share with people, particularly students, that, they can live their dream. They can reach their dream. May not be easy, but I don't want them to give up on their dream. So that's why the impetus behind writing the book.
I absolutely love it. And I love that inspirational message, Pilar. Following off of that and sticking with the concept of inspiration. So we know really what compelled you to embark upon this journey and write this book, and that underlying message that you were hoping to instill in your readers. Now, I want to take a step back and from a broader perspective analyze inspiration. So from the age of 7, you knew you wanted to be a nurse. Well, where does writing fit into all of this? Was that a hobby of yours? Were there certain artists that inspired you growing up? Really, where does that love for creative writing come from?
Well, I think it comes from when I finally made it to junior college. When I graduated from high school, I was the first one in my family to go to college. Nobody else had gone. I didn't have anybody to guide me. I knew that I needed to go to college in order to become a nurse, so I attended a junior college, and there was a lot of challenges to doing that. I didn't know what classes to take. There was nobody to say, take this class, take that class. And so I took an English class. And I had a professor who, by the name of Charles Dela, who was an English professor, and he actually ended up being an assemblyman for California. But he taught a class in English that I took, and he taught me about Shakespeare. And I fell in love with Shakespeare. He did Henry VIII, and he was wonderful, and that really got my interest going. So one day he said to us, you have to write a paper about 3 things that you don't like. So write a paper. It had to be, 5 pages long, 3 things that you don't like. And so I sat down. I thought, what is it that I don't like? And I wasn't crazy about vegetables, so I decided to title my paper The ABCs of Vegetables. It was asparagus, broccoli, and cauliflower, which I now love, but I didn't at the time. So I wrote the paper, and he really liked it, and he read it to the whole class. So then I thought, well, maybe I do have an ability to write, and that's kind of what launched me into writing. I also write poetry. I love to write poetry. That's one of the ways that I relax, and I've had one of my poems, I submitted it, and it was published in a national book of poetry. So I enjoy writing. It's a way that I relax when I'm stressed out, is by sitting down and writing. So that's kind of what launched me into this writing ability.
People, again, we're here on the line with Pilar de la Cruz Samoulian. We're discussing her amazing memoir, But I Want to Be a Nurse, available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. Pilar, next question that I'd love to go into, and I think it's safe to assume the answer to this next question, but you know what happens when you assume, so I'm not going to do that. So I have you here on the line. I'm going to go directly to the source. In your words, Pilar, who is your intended audience for this book? And then the second part to it, which I know we've already covered, but I think it's worth repeating and doubling down on. What is the message you're hoping your readers take from your book?
Well, the people that I want to reach are students in particular, but anybody can learn from this book because it's a way of facing challenges and overcoming barriers for anything that you want to achieve. But I really want to reach out to students, and particularly minority students who have been told, number one, you're to be seen and not heard, or been told, well, you're not smart enough to do that, or have been told, no, you better choose something else because, of your background or your, you don't come from money or whatever that may be, that barrier may be that's placed before them. I want them to know that if they believe in themselves and they work hard enough and they really strive to reach their goal, that they can reach that goal regardless of what it is. So it doesn't just have to be students. It can be adults trying to change careers. It can be someone who has been told all along you can't do something and they feel that they can, to go for it. And the book talks about all the challenges and barriers that I had to overcome. I come from a poor family. My parents were migrant workers. I lived with my grandparents. They spoke only Spanish when I was small. So I didn't learn to speak English until I went to school. And that was a big challenge for me, trying to speak English and being teased by my school classmates because I couldn't say the wordings correctly, or I didn't know how to say something. But I got past that, and I learned how to deal with that. I also worked out in the fields, and so a lot of people that have worked out in the fields, I know what it's like to work out in the heat, work out in the cold, and one of the things that people who strive to reach something, one of the things you do while you're working out there is daydream. You daydream. Someday I'm going to have a good job. Someday I'm going to have a nice car. Someday I'm going to have a nice home. And that's what keeps you going. That's what kept me going as I was out there working day in and day out, trying to save money for school, picking grapes, doing whatever it was that was out in the field in order to live. And that's how I grew up. My father eventually had ranches, and we were the work hands. And so we were out there working every day during vacations. It was funny because first day back at school, number one, they couldn't pronounce my name, which was Pilar Ibarra at the time. So every time, they started calling out roll calls, nobody could ever pronounce my name correctly. Number two, it was like, what did you do this summer? And everybody would say, oh, I went to Disneyland, I went to Santa Cruz, I went to vacation to Grand Canyon. And, they would look at us and say, well, I picked grapes. That's what I had to do. I didn't go anywhere this summer. Mm-hmm. So it was that kind of background that I knew that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And my father never went to school a day in his life. My mother only went to the 8th grade, and they knew that education was the key to success. And so they helped us and pushed us in education, and I was able to go to school but had to work at the same time. And so it was hard to keep up my grades and work and do what I wanted to do and still strive for reaching that goal and keeping it out there and knowing that in order to reach it, I had to work hard and I had to make some sacrifices, which I did.
Pilar, listen, this is going to help so many people. I love what you're talking about here. Last couple of questions as we close out. What would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began?
I think what surprised me is the fact that I was able to look at myself and see how far I had come from when I first started. And I thought to myself, if I could do it, then anybody could do it. And that's the message that I really wanted to get across, is that anybody can reach their goal and never give up. I had many people that doubted me. I had people that said you can't do it or it's too hard. But I think what surprised me the most is the determination that I had all those years. I didn't know I had it in me. And also that I found my voice. I found my voice to be assertive, to stand up for myself and say, you're not going to push me into something that I don't want to do. This is what I want to do, and somehow, some way, I'm going to reach that goal, regardless of the many obstacles that I had to go through to reach it. Everything from having to go through surgery and almost being asked to drop out of nursing school to being away from nursing school to losing our house in a fire and losing everything but the clothes on our back. It's so many things, to being told by a doctor, what are you doing in this country? Why don't you go back where you came from? To having to prove myself over and over again because I was a minority, and to be able to stand on my own 2 feet and find my voice and stand up for myself.
Last question here, Pilar. Following off of that wonderful piece of advice and leading to another piece of advice that you can offer. Pilar, as I mentioned to you on the pre-screening call, I'm an artist myself. Now, I'm in a different medium, of course, but I love having this platform to pay it forward for other artists listening in. Now, for any new writers listening in right now, Pilar, what are some words of wisdom that you can offer them about the journey they're getting ready to embark upon?
I think it's important to keep a journal. I didn't keep a journal, but I think it's important to keep a journal of your accomplishments and some things that you went through to get past those challenges. When you have a day when you're feeling really low, some note that somebody gave you and said you can do it, some words of advice that somebody may give you, your mentor that maybe helped you along the way, using all of those things to help you, I think is really important. I like to journal, and I found that I'm writing a second book, and I found that that's been really helpful with writing the second book. So I think that would be my recommendation, is to journal those special events that you can go back and refer to and say, oh, yeah, I remember that, or I remember when I was at my lowest, and that helped me get past that stumbling block.
I absolutely love it. And people, you know what I love even more? Is we're at the end of the interview now. We've discussed so much information, and yet we've barely scratched the surface somehow. You know where you have to go. I'm going to mention it again, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. The title you have to pick up is But I Want to Be a Nurse, and the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table is Pilar de la Cruz Samoulian. You surely will not be disappointed. People, I'm telling you, whether you are in the medical field or not doesn't matter. You can learn so much from her story. You can be inspired by her story, and then you take that and you apply it to whatever your circumstances may be. I promise you, it absolutely can apply. Pilar, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. I truly mean that. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you very much. Truly enjoyed it.